New day, new part of the project. Today we're going to be focusing on doweling now that we've got all the pieces cut to size. Doweling, if you're not familiar, is if you've ever installed furniture, put together furniture, you get these little pieces, these dowels, and there'll be holes usually along the edges of the wood that you put these in, and it fits perfectly with the hole on another piece of wood, and that's called, or one of the many ways you can join wood. And we're going to be doing that to just give the overall frame some additional stability considering the weight of the glass. So if you've never done doweling before, or if you have but you're using, like I am, a brand new doweling jig, then it's always best to start on some junk, just extra pieces of wood that you have lying around. I had already drilled these holes, and I'll just show you the dowels. These are 3/8 inch holes. The dowels fit nice. Just got to make sure everything you buy, the brad point bit, the dowels, everything is the same hole diameter. And that's it. Now, the importance is making sure that the wood is flush on both sides, and also that the depth of the holes that you're putting in are not too shallow or not too deep, because then either the little dowel here is going to fall too short or be too high up, and you're not going to have that solid connection. So you want to get right in the middle. And the way to do that is to obviously divide the length of the dowel by 2 to figure out how far you have to go into one side. And then with the doweling jig, you know that since the board is going to go flush along the bottom here, that you're just going to go that specific depth further. So you don't have to be exactly perfect, but you want to get close. So I already have the drill stop in place right now because I already measured it last night. And you can see that it goes down exactly, in this case, 3/4 of an inch, because the dowel is 1.5 inches long. So this will always guarantee that you're going to get the exact depth that you need. Now the brad points allow you to, when you start drilling the hole, get right in there without it drifting on you. But you'll notice that you kind of have to actually measure by the outside, because the dowel is pretty much flat on the surface. So if you go to this depth, then the dowel won't actually get that far because the wood will be in the way. So you actually want to measure by right here. So you need the power drill, the brad point bit, 3/8 inch, the 3/8 inch drill stop to stop the drill from going further than it needs to go. Obviously the doweling jig. This is a self-centering doweling jig. As it closes in on the wood, it's going to remain center in the edge of the wood perfectly. And so I've tested it out on just some excess wood that I had, and it lined up perfectly, so we're good to go. Okay, I just got done drilling the first 2 holes, and it's always important to mark the wood to know which side is the inside that you plan to use. And in this case, I needed to actually label also the bottom and the top, because the holes here are a little different distance-wise. Because this location here is where the switches are going to be, so I needed to make sure that I was joining in a little bit of a different location for stability purposes. So anyway, I drilled the 4 total holes, Put the two dowels in, and now I'm just putting it together. And notice that the depths are right because the two pieces of wood are able to join together. And it's a little off here only because this piece ended up, when I rip cut it, it ended up being maybe 1/2 millimeter wider, but that's going to be sanded down anyway. But this side here is perfectly flush. You can barely feel anything when you move your thumb over it, so it came out perfectly. And then of course we're going to use wood filler to smooth all the lines out anyway. So, and then after sanding it down, this whole frame is going to look like one piece of wood. So that's joining using doweling. Okay, well, we're done with the wood joining with the doweling technique, and the dowels are in here, trust me on that. I went ahead and put all the pieces together, clamped them down nice and tight, because I need to make sure that the outside dimensions and the inside dimensions are exactly to spec. And I went ahead and did all that measuring, and it came out perfect, so we're good to go. The next thing that we need to do is draw a 1/2 inch line all along the inside perimeter, because that's where we're going to do the routing to drop the mirror into. So this doesn't have to be a perfect science. You want to certainly make sure you're bigger than the actual mirror, otherwise you got to go back and route some more. But if you go a little over, since all of this is behind the scenes in the back, no one's going to see it, and even if the mirror moves a little bit, the mirror is still going to be bigger than what's seen from the other side, so no one's going to be the wiser. You just don't want to go too crazy with the routing and get close to some of these other points like the light sockets. So that's it. We're going to go ahead and start routing. You'll notice there's a couple whoopses that happen when you're running a router freehand, but that's okay because this is the inside and none of it's going to be seen, and the mirror will be able to sit within this slot, and these little imperfections are not going to have any impact whatsoever. There were a couple points, I don't know if I can get it clear with the camera, but some of the edging here is not as smooth as I'd like. I'm going to sand this down, but if there are areas where there was some splintering and I need to use some wood filler, I'm going to go ahead and apply some wood filler, let that dry, sand it down, just so that I can have a nice clean inside edge, because this will be visible from the front. So I want to make sure it's uniform all around. Okay, it's time to start the gluing process. The important thing to do before you start gluing is to assemble everything that you're going to need. All the clamps, extra wood, because the largest clamp I have is 24 inches, and that's too long for joining these two pieces of wood. So I'm going to use extra wood, clamp this down, and then attach a clamp from there to here. So need extra wood and extra clamps to do all that, plus a straight edge, because whenever you are joining pieces of wood that are fairly narrow, they can give in either direction sideways, so you want to make sure you have a nice straight edge that way. Some people ask what's the difference between Titebond 2, which is incredibly popular, probably the most popular wood glue, and Titebond 3. Two main differences. Titebond 3 tends to settle a little slower, which is good when you have a lot of things going on, a lot of clamps you got to put in place. Gives you more time to get it done, where it doesn't harden too quickly. The second thing is, in this case it won't matter, but it's FDA approved, so if you're making cutting boards or other things that are going to be in contact with food, you definitely want to use Titebond 3. So, time to start the gluing process. Okay, if you remember when we created the on-off switch and the outlet flush with the board, we don't want to use screws on the face side. We want it nice and clean, so we have to secure it from the back. But after doing all the routing, there isn't enough wood here to use the pre-made holes for screws. So I need to be able to use the thicker areas to be able to secure this down. So one thing you can do is go to Lowe's or Home Depot. These are like $1 a piece. They're found in the electrical department. They're used for their plates covering like electrical junction boxes and whatnot. And so I'm gonna I already measured out the square that'll go over this piece right here, and the distance will allow me, the extra distance will allow me to put a couple screw holes on both sides, and I'll use that to secure the whole plate down, and then I'll just put in some filler there to keep it in place. And I'm going to use my Dremel with the metal cutting wheel to go ahead and cut the square. Okay, in the background you can see all the clamps holding down the what will be the bottom panel that will be mounted onto the base. It's still drying, so I'm going to give it a couple more hours. In the meantime, while I got some time, I'm just setting up the electrical, testing it out. So in the foreground we have power coming in to the outlet and USB ports. That's an always on situation, and then that will daisy chain to the light switch and dimmer, and then to the string of bulbs. So just to test it out, I just have one socket set up, and we'll go ahead and plug it in. Alright, now that we're plugged in, we can go ahead and test this. You'll notice I have electrical tape around here. That helps for security reasons. It allows you to be able to pick this up, handle it a little easier without worrying about getting electrocuted. So it's always good to wrap electrical tape around your connections. So I'm just plugging in the electrical tester, and that's what we want to see, the two green to be lit up. That means the circuit is working and it's the proper polarity. We'll try the other one. Looks good. Now we'll just try the on-off switch. Perfect. And the little dimmer here. Oh, look at that. Where we're going to be putting this is by a window, so if we get a lot of natural daylight, she might not need the full power of the lights. You can see they get pretty bright, and there's going to be 12 of them. So it's good to have the dimming capability. Plus, when you're putting on makeup and you want to mimic, let's say you're going out to a function at night, and it's going to be dark indoors, you want to see what your makeup looks like under those conditions as well. So it's good to have the ability to control the amount of light when putting on makeup. So I hear. I don't put makeup on myself, I swear. Okay, now that our frame is built, everything is dried, the first thing we're going to do is chisel any bits of glue that had seeped through that would just take too long to sand. And then after that we're going to start sanding with 120 and then move up to 220. We don't have to go any higher than that because the paint is going to cover up any imperfections beyond that. So if we were to try to sand in the 300s or 400s, it's just a waste of time. To get a nice flat edge, you could use just a simple block, spare block lying around, and that way you can get a nice edge for when you're working on the corners. So, time to start chiseling. Okay, the last piece I need to cut is the base, and the frame almost fits the width of the desk that it's going to be sitting on. So while I'd like to create a perfect oval, I have to go a little bit sharper of a curve on the ends here because this board is pretty much exactly the width of the table, and I don't want the base to be hanging over the edge of the table. So what I did was I put nails on the corners, on all four corners of where the frame is going to sit, and then I wrapped the steel wire around the nails, and then I was able to outline with a pencil a nice oval curve, oval shaped curve all the way around that's pretty uniform. And then when I got to the edges I had to touch it up a little bit, but it's hardly noticeable. It still looks like a nice curve all the way around. Okay, here's the finished base. After cutting it out with a jigsaw, I hit it with the belt sander just to even out the edges, and then to sand it even further I cut some 2-inch PVC, not completely in half, a little less than half, and then I would put the sandpaper inside of it, and it would give me a nice rounded edge so that I can create a nice smooth curve along the top here. I want to keep the underside flat, but I wanted to soften this, and then I hit it with the 220 sandpaper afterwards to make it even smoother. So that's the finished product. It looks really, really sharp. So now we're going to attach the frame to this, glue it, and then once that dries, it's time to paint.